Yeah, there we are. Hello. Look at your beautiful face.
So nice to see you guys.
Yes, you too. Look at you. It's glowing, beaming there.
My day off glow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great because we've been so estranged physically as well as, and in our situations, we've sort of, everybody's been going their own way. And it's so good that we can have this time to pull us all back in again.
So nice.
Yeah. And apologies to everybody who's waiting for this podcast. I got one of my clients called me up yesterday and went, yeah, what's going on with the podcast? You haven't recorded for a while. So
We've all been gallivanting.
Doing wonderful things.
We've been dancing with the mother, I think, all of us in a beautiful way.
Yeah.
And I think we've all been taking the lead, which is really nice too. She's in step with us, and knowing that we need to have our head and be given our head to move forward with our destinies.
Yeah.
It's so good to see you. Oh my God.
I just wish I could hug you both.
A virtual hug.
Yes. We'll come into physical alignment again soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, I was going to come down this weekend, but the weather is not in our favor.
No, you don't want to get stuck down here.
No, forced rest.
Yes, yeah. So do you want to share with us what you've been doing, Christy, on this break from last year?
Yeah, so I have moved away into regional Queensland, further, deeper into the valley of regional Queensland. And I'm doing a grad program as a registered midwife.
Yeah.
So yeah, not exactly the plan that I thought I was going to have, but exactly where I need to be. So
exactly, divine and perfect timing.
Yeah, so I'm hoping to get. I've just started in a maternity unit, and I'm hoping to get into a midwife group practice. That's the plan.
Oh, fantastic! Sounds perfect.
And I think sometimes one door closes so another can open, and I don't know, some facilities, especially in the regional areas, the smaller ones, the non-tertiary ones in particular, they don't have the capacity for MGP per se, unless you're really small, and then of course you get to know everybody in the community and regional area. But going to a larger tertiary area, they've got more capacity for the kind of models of care that you're actually looking at, and that are much more in line with your philosophy. So that, I think, is a godsend in a way, wasn't it?
Yeah, so I'm lucky. The facility I've gone to has a caseloaded MGP, so that means that the number of midwives fluctuates. So they did have 9 last year and they're down to 3. So they're pretty keen for us grads to get in.
Beautiful.
And
what a great
yeah.
I think when I started my career, I went straight within 6 months of graduating. I was in a teen model, but it was care across the spectrum sort of thing. And it really was a great learning. And I think I've been there ever since, like that sort of model, so to speak. Yeah.
And I think for me, I went from a small hospital where there were people from a large regional area in Canada. We saw lots of different people, and there were some, of course, that came more often for assessments and so on the birth suite. And that allowed us then to have continuity of care for the higher risk women, which was a really interesting twist to where we're actually looking at that as a way forward. Instead of making only low risk women in MGP, we're actually doing an all risk or allowing for a high risk team. So I think that's a good place to go, and because really, there's all sorts of people and all sorts of support that needs to be given to women, and it's not just the low risk women that need it.
I think sometimes the high risk women actually need it more.
I agree.
Yeah, this is an all risk model for MGP as well. And so I'm in a bigger regional center, so we have a very, very large area of women that come to birth with us. We're the highest level hospital in the area, from the bottom of Queensland to the top of Queensland. So we take all the, anything exciting and high risk as well. So good experience.
Hey.
So at this point, when you just entered into your grad year, I know some just go straight into the grad program in an MGP model, but so what they're doing with you is they're introducing you to the various areas of care?
Yeah, so we've done an orientation and we've been put in, so I do an antenatal clinic on the same day each fortnight, and I'm picking up my own caseload through my women that I'm meeting on the days. So in the past, they gave grads just 15 women and here you go, some are about to birth and some are brand new, but they've learned some lessons. So we'll pick up our women as we go and build relationships and put them under our wing. And it's already set up so that in antenatal care, you see the same 2 midwives the whole way through, no matter whether you're MGP or not.
That's good.
Ideally, so like we have a clinic day, and then we pick up our women, and if they come and birth when we're on, we can request and go with the women.
So
and I've already got to do that.
So this is how it's happening now. And I guess it really depends too, with that first introductory meeting, how you both feel about each other. I mean, sometimes it'll gel really well, and I'm sure sometimes it doesn't gel. And so it allows both you and the woman to come to the place of understanding that, yes, I really want to be working with you. Is that the case? Or because there's
Yeah, it is. So it just worked out that last week I met a lovely woman on my clinic day, and she was booked for an induction on my birth suite day, and she's like, oh, I really hope, like, I'd love to see you. So I got to start her induction for her yesterday. Which was really nice. And I think it's the same thing as when you're a student, like when you've built that relationship, the women are happy for you to learn with them. So I already had that, which was lovely yesterday. So it's a big introduction into intervention as well. So I did my first cervidil yesterday, which was part of an induction process that I've never done before, but we got there.
And the staff that you're working with, I'm imagining, are very supportive, especially because I think what's happening in the hospitals that, we're a bit, as a hospital midwife, we become quite appreciative of having any and everyone that comes walking in the door and says, hi, I'm here to help. And so that goes a long way as well. And they embrace and support you in a way that maybe at another time, it might not have happened in that same way.
It's a really interesting time, I think, in healthcare everywhere, universally, that, there's such a need. So there's a giant group of us midwives who have come in as grads, like a quarter of the staff are grads. Almost. And we have lots of registered nurses working that aren't midwives in our area. So it's really, everyone is very grateful for that midwifery skill coming in. And people have been so supportive, which is great.
That's
thankfully.
It is.
So good to hear. I'm happy for you.
Yeah, me too. And another thing that I really love about having grads on board everywhere I've been working is the fact that they've got fresh information. They've got the newest and most up-to-date research studies. They've been sort of, I guess, nurtured in a very midwifery-centered care model. And so when they come in to an area where you've got us more older ones, I guess you could say, or more weathered maybe, some are really attached to a certain way of doing things, while other ones want to see a shifting of that to more women-centered care. And by bringing grads into the picture and having them involved with the culture of the wards and the areas, you can introduce really good up-to-date information that can sort of feed the culture and feed the shift of change, I guess. So that's
we've been feeling that. I think we definitely keep getting told to go with what we know and to share that research. And lots of the older midwives are asking oh, what do you get taught at uni, like what is it that you're getting told about IM injections or this or that. So it's really nice for them, yeah, to be encouraging and value our experience, even if it's tiny so far.
Won't take long.
No, it won't. And you know, Christy, I always find that when you're in a workplace, you've got children, perhaps you know, you might have a partner who's doing opposite shifts. You're doing a full time or a 0.8, and to go home and actually look at the research is very challenging, and a lot of us don't have that time to actually say, oh, I've just worked a 12 or an 8-hour shift, and now I'm going to go home and have a look at the research that looks at GTT, for instance, or water in birth, for instance, you know, or what does it feel like to be a home birth mama that goes in for a transfer, and having you there on the spot, you're a walking, talking resource. So I really like that. I really like that so it's something that over lunch you can talk about, or, you know, or when someone's sort of confronted with something, oh, well, Christy's done this, or she might, you know, and so it's on the spot learning and applying within context, the research, isn't it really?
Yeah, definitely. We've got lots of new doctors as well, which is very exciting. So because I trained in a really large tertiary facility, it's been really interesting to have watched the switch of the doctors come in, because all the fresh junior doctors have come in with us grads as well. And so some things, or I'm already seeing change in 4 weeks of being there, which is exciting. Like the use of the balloon catheters for inductions and things, they had not been used previously where I am. And yeah, we've had a new doctor come in who is all about it and all about the research, and has started doing that instead of Prostons for everyone. So yeah, exciting.
That sounds so good. And so once you've done your maternity, so you're on the postnatal ward, antenatal ward, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so I've got my clinic day, which I do once a fortnight, and then we get rostered postnatal or birth suite.
So like 3 months in birth suite, 3 months in postnatal. It's just it's mixed up every day. That's good. That's
integrated.
Yeah, I think that's a lot better way to do it, because like where I trained and worked, it was like you did 3 months on postnatal ward, then 3 months in birth suite. So by the time you got back to birth suite, you were so out of touch with birth suite. A lot of women, a lot of new grads felt really overwhelmed. So ended up just staying on the postnatal ward and never ever going back to birth suite, because they were so overwhelmed with it. So I think that's really good that, you know, that your roster consists of you're either postnatal or birth suite.
Yeah, it's really nice. The team here work really well together. So in the, like when we start a shift, we're rostered to birth suite or postnatal. But for instance, if I knew that I had that induction woman coming in, there's a lot of room for, like, I can swap with another midwife and jump on. And yeah, it's really integrated. And I think they do value continuity of care, even in the fragmented model, which is really exciting. And it's good for us because you need to kind of contextualize each area. I think if you didn't do birth suite and just did postnatal, you wouldn't understand what's happening in birth suite and why things are going the way they are. So,
and I always found that there was a lot of real disconnect between, in a really large tertiary hospital, there was a lot of disconnect between birth suite and postnatal. So the postnatal ward would like get cranky with birth suite for doing things, and birth suite would get cranky with the postnatal ward. And it's like there's no communication because, you know, they don't work in each other's areas. So they have an understanding. So because I was sort of floating in and out of both places, I was sitting there going, yeah, but you've got to understand what birth suite's like. And they're like, well, we're too busy up here to take a woman who's had a baby. And it's like, and birth suite have no room. They need a room for a lady labouring woman. So we have to accommodate that. So there's that, I think, and I found coming up here to the small unit, it's sort of that flow, like you're on the ward and then somebody comes in and like, oh, Debbie, someone's coming in labour. Can you rush over to birth suite? Or not rush over, but can you go over to birth suite and look after that woman? So, and we'll pick up your client. So it's that real flow around the unit.
Yeah, and I think too, it takes away the ownership of an environment. So we work in First Suite and it's our area.
Yes, I'm a birth suite midwife.
That's right. I'm a First Suite midwife, or I'm a postnatal midwife, and so
Yeah.
taking away that ownership then allows us to shift our vision onto the actual women that we're working with, the women that we're caring for.
Hallelujah. Yeah.
And it also takes away that sort of, this is how it's always been and this is how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
So I think I really appreciate the fact that you're in this center. I'm just so thrilled. I'm
I'm excited for the women. Like it sounds like you say, even in a fragmented care, these women are now being exposed to these wonderful new grads who are very woman centered. You know, I'm excited. I'm excited for the area. I'm excited for, you know, for what you're bringing to the table, Christine.
Yeah, it's
hard because you are going to come across resistance. That's a given. It happens everywhere, I think.
And what comes with the resistance, and I think what underlies the resistance is fear.
Yes.
And I think one of the things I think we've all noticed that over the years is that there's an element of fear-based practice, the worst case scenario. And I think that one of the things that I learned to appreciate from my hospital time was the level of fear and the worst case scenario, and having compassion for the people that come from a fear-based model of care. And I'm not saying everyone in medicine is that way inclined,
No.
but there is an element of worst case scenario that I think working within the system, it gives me compassion for the people that are in there, and finding ways to negotiate and support your fellow workers to reduce their fear strategies, their place of fear. So I think that's another thing that you can offer in that environment.
Yeah. So in our orientation, we orientated with some of our new obstetric doctors that are rotating, and I met this amazing doctor who I've instantly become great friends with. And she said to me, I've never seen a baby come out of a vagina without a problem. Like, she's never seen a normal birth. And I was like, sis, like, come with us. Like, we will show you some normal births. And she's in her second year in obstetrics and she's never seen a normal birth. And it's been really great because we've been able to talk about it. And she's already had a team leader bring her into a normal birth to observe. And all of us grads have been like, come on, like, we'll show you, like, come and see something normal.
In defense of the doctors, they usually only get to see the worst of the worst, because us midwives look after the women and we call the doctors when things go pear-shaped.
Exactly. So,
and it's true, they often only ever see complications.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's, you know, I love what you're doing. That's such a great thing. I remember once having a doctor come in with me and they sort of just said, oh, he came in with the lady and says, oh, they've said I can come with this woman. I went, oh, that's fine. And I said to the client, the lady, oh, you know, how did you give birth last time? Oh, on my back. Were you comfortable? No, not really. I said, well, how about this time you want to stand up or, you know, kneel or whatever? And she was like, oh, can I? And the doctor's like looking at me with this look of horror on his face, like, what is she talking about? And this woman got up and she birthed standing beside the bed. It was absolutely beautiful. And the doctor, I showed him how to, you know, and afterwards he pulled me up out in the hallway and he went, wow, like, when a woman's upright like that, you really don't have to do a lot, do you? And it was just such a, if only all doctors could get to see those beautiful, really, like you say, normal births. He was he must have been in his first or second year as an obstetric training. But it was, that moment was just so beautiful to share with the doctor, to see, like you saying, like with this doctor, come and see normal. It really is beautiful to share our expertise as midwives in normal. It is really nice to share that with the whole team. I had ambulance officers as well, you know, brought a client in pushing, and the young paramedic was like, can I stay and watch? And I said, if it's okay with the woman, and she was fine. And she was just in awe of how easy birth can be. And I even had paramedics come to a recent home birth. And there was 3 paramedics there, 2 young women and their senior officer. I don't know what they call them, sorry. But she was explaining they all sat quietly in the dark. They didn't interfere. They were just so respectful of this woman. It was absolutely beautiful to see. And the 2 younger officers, I say younger as in age, not as in experience. They probably were very experienced, but they'd never seen a birth before. So the senior paramedic was explaining to them, this is what happens in a birth. You can see the baby's color changing. And it was just, and so between myself and the first responder, we gave a really good lesson, and the mother of the baby, of course, gave a really good learning opportunity. And those 2 paramedics stayed till the placenta come out, and then they checked the placenta with me, and they chatted to the mum, and it was just so beautiful. So I think we have a really important role as midwives.
Well, we have to go back to the World Health Organization, where midwives are the experts in the area of normal birth. Now, I hesitate to use normal because normal can be shifted to whatever the norm is at the time. But certainly physiological and natural birthing support. We are the experts, and that's been written down in the definition of midwives. So I think that's right, and to claim that and then have confidence in that, and move forward with the opportunities that we're given to educate and support the other colleagues, who are involved with birth. That's such a good opportunity.
Yes, exciting times. And what's been happening back home? Anything exciting?
Home's a very interesting question. I live between the North Brisbane area and out here up at Deb's place up outside of Harvey Bay, and then of course Bundaberg. So there's a huge range of women out here in the big world that are asking for support. Some of them are coming a bit later in their time, like at 30 weeks, when they start realizing that they are too fretful or not happy with the more medicalized sort of birthing philosophy. So they're starting to, or maybe it's the restrictions or the regulations or the mandates. So they're actually coming out of the woodwork, so to speak. So for me, I'm actually finding that I've got 3 different homes right now in order to support women as closely as I can, so that when they go into labor, I can actually be there. Now, we also have to consider there have been floods down in our area. So as midwives, we're amazingly fluid, which goes with the floods perhaps. We're finding that we've been cut off from our own women that we're supporting, and we're covering for each other. So it's been I've been in an area where the midwife couldn't get to the woman she was supporting, and she was coming up to being term and ready to have her baby, and so I was covering there and going to do antenatal visits and supporting her and getting ready for the birth, making sure the water pool stuff is all ready, all the practical stuff, and just fine-tuning those things, knowing that her labor time was coming. And then someone else was covering for me down closer to Brisbane because I couldn't get out of the area I was at. So it's really interesting to watch how women are actually quite okay with that, because they know that they've worked with me before, or they've worked with somebody I know, or it's just a philosophy too. It's sometimes not the continuity of care as much as continuity of philosophy, and embracing all women. So we've had a really interesting shifting and shorting, moving about a little bit. But what's really been interesting is in that trusting mother, trusting nature to do the right thing, and helping women feel safe in all sorts of environments, whether there's flood or whatever. So I've been working closely with a young woman, and then suddenly we were able to get out of our areas, and the midwife, who was her midwife, was able to come in. I was able to get to another. So on the second, we had two beautiful births. The roads opened and the bridges were open, so the other midwife was able to get to her lady who birthed beautifully on 2 days after I'd seen her, and then I was able to get out for another woman that I was seconding for, and she birthed as well. So it was a really interesting dance with the mother nature, the floods, the rains, the storms. So so we had two beautiful babies on the second. Both, one was a girl and the other was a little boy. So it was really so it was quite a journey for us. It was a bit pulling back on the stress and the anxiety of, how is this going to work out, feeling that you're juggling a lot, but always keeping a clear, grounded feeling of love for that woman and that care for that woman, so that, yes, world's going crazy right now, but you stay in your body, stay with yourself, be with yourself, be with your baby. And and that's the big thing, that we midwives do. And so it doesn't matter what sort of chaos is going on outside, be it in the hospital or be it in the home or in the environment, is to keep reminding that woman that she and that baby are the center of the universe. And so that she can get on with the business of zoning out or zoning in, and trusting and feeling safe to give birth to that little child. So that's been an interesting thing. We did have one transfer, but we'll be talking about that possibly today. We'll see how it goes. But certainly that was my week. So it's quite fun, actually. And then to fill in, going to antenatals in amongst it all, and canceling others and doing Zooms, to do birth plans,
Via Zoom.
Via Zoom, and having all her support people there, and Deb and I on the other side of the Zoom, and finding ways to meet the needs of the women in amongst it all, using technology, which we're doing today, which is fantastic. So it's been a full week. Thank you for asking.
Exciting. That all sounds very, very exciting. And yeah, it's so nice. It was really interesting what you said about the continuity of philosophy. I think that's, that trust that women have, that, they know that you're on the same page as them.
That's really important. And I found that, I have found that, like, there's been times when I've been called to step up to be second with a woman I've never met before, or even step in to be primary for a woman that I've never met before or met once. But to know that those women, they feel safe because they know you're on the same page. They know she's very similar to, Terry in her thinking, or Rami Marie in her thinking, whoever I was working with at the time. I think that puts them at ease. And working in the birth centre, it was a very similar scenario. It's like, you may click with a midwife or your midwife, but on the day you might have a different midwife. And knowing that they have the similar philosophy does help. It I suppose it's, in a way, you're not like disappointed or feeling let down by your other midwife, because things happen.
And
they
abandoned.
get sick.
I think that's a really strong word that some women have been using lately. They felt abandoned by the system, abandoned. And I think you're actually right on. I love the idea of the continuity of philosophy, because when you come from a place of women-centered care, honoring that woman that you're sitting in front of is more important than, your face or that. I think trust and trusting women to know what they need, and coming from that place of trust is probably what women are looking for in a satisfying relationship with her care provider.
And that's, and I think that's really interesting, and it really flows with what you were saying about, like you mentioned that you transferred a woman recently. That can be a really hard thing, that transfer, that, going into a system with you don't know Like it's not transferring from a private midwife to or like a home birth midwife to a home birth midwife. You're transferring from a home birth midwife to a mainstream midwife. And it doesn't mean that mainstream midwife is a bad midwife, but I imagine for that woman or that family, that fear of moving from their safe space, their safe provider, into an unknown.
Yeah,
I think it's that feeling of like the lottery, like whoever is on shift is who you get. And I think that is what happens in the hospital as well. Like I've already witnessed women, like you don't already know the philosophy of the midwife that you're going to receive.
That's it.
You're just going to get what you get.
Yeah.
And yeah,
you have to remember that women choose home birth. They've actually made that choice. A lot of women that go into mainstream, they don't really have, maybe they don't, a lot of them anyway, I'm generalizing here, but there's this sort of, you see the doctor and the doctor says, oh, and I've sent a referral off to the local hospital. So there's this element of not having active involvement in the choice of the model of care.
Well, some
But in
places
home
may
birth,
not even have
exactly.
that model.
That's
They
true.
may not have NGP or anything.
That's right. But
Yeah.
when women choose home birth, they've actively done the research. They've actually looked at the options of care and have made an active, conscious choice to take on home birth, as opposed to hospital birth. So when a woman then has to backtrack after this ideal in their head, that they're going to have this beautiful home birth and water, the candles are burning, there's LED lights glowing in the background, you know, all those beautiful romantic things that we actually would like to have every woman birth in.
Yeah.
But if she has to change from actively choosing that as opposed to hospital, and then actively having to choose to go back into the hospital, this is a huge shift, especially A, she's exhausted. B, she's probably stressed. C, she knows that her baby is maybe, you know, having a hard time. So that's adding to her, oh my God, save the life of my child. Her anger and her rage that all of a sudden her dream birth isn't coming about. And of course, that's a sense of loss. So we could look at Kubler-Ross and, you know, look at the various theories of loss. We also then have to look at the exhaustion and then having then to reorganize herself to go back into a place that she's chosen not to engage with. So I think it's a huge sort of area of complexity that I think that as home birth midwives, we need to be really aware of. Women need to be aware that these feelings are really normal. And it's really natural to have this anger, this sadness, this self-incrimination. It's my fault or it's her fault or whatever. And we also have to educate people at the other end, the paramedics, the obstetrical team, the midwives in the hospital. So I think it's something that I've become aware of this week, very firsthand. I mean, it's happened before, but this is very fresh in my mind, this sort of movement. From a home birth to a hospital birth. So particularly she's got a history as well of having a failed natural birth last time.
Or just
that word
birth
failed.
trauma from
that's right. But the failedness comes into it too. So that's right. So add to it the trauma of possibly or of a toxic sort of relationship with the hospital.
Yeah. It's an interesting topic, and I've seen it in the birth center as well. That feeling of failure. It's a feeling of failure. Like, you know, their dreams have gone. My plan of having a beautiful water birth in a beautiful setting, and now my waters have released and I've got meconium and I have to go to birth suite and be continuously monitored and no water birth, you know, just there is a real sense of, well, what's the point? I recently heard someone say to me, well, if I can't have my water birth, I may as well just take the drugs. And it was a real defeatism in it. This is coming from the birth center going to birth suite. There was a real defeatism in it. Well, I'm not even going to try because what's the point? I don't get to have my birth in the place that I wanted to have my birth. And so I suppose, you know, It's a reality of home birth.
Absolutely.
It's a reality of birth center birth.
And I think there's so much that goes on with that, because there are women who don't want to mention that they're having a home birth to their family, because then they get Aunt Mary saying,
Told
oh
you so."
no, well, you know, you're taking a risk there, or a doctor, or, you know, the whole medical or the hospital, and oh, you're risking, you know, so there's a lot of stuff they have to overcome in order to embrace having home birth. And so they've gone down a pathway of self, I don't know, of boosting themselves up, of you know, and they, you know, and reading all the right books, and watching all the YouTubes, and getting their partner on board, and getting him to understand that, and you know, and then they hire midwives, say, you can do this, you've got this, or the whole Facebook page, and you've got this, mama, and it's like, but sometimes they don't. It's like,
Yeah.
oh my God, that's huge to be boosted up. So that anger comes also, and just from, you know, experiences with women that do have to transfer, that anger and that rage of, you know, I've been let down. I'm not only have I let myself down, but the whole world has let me down. And you know, you said that I could have a home, and then I had this. So the anger can come out not only to herself because she's angry that she didn't get it. She might be angry at the baby, which is another really strong thing for women. And they might be angry at their partner because they weren't the man they needed. You know, I mean, it's amazing where that can go, and the blame and the guilt and all that. And they could even be angry at the midwives, you know, or the doula that, you know, didn't do that movement or didn't give her that, you know, that essence. Or
Yeah, I've actually had midwife women be angry at me, and it's like I totally get it.
Yeah.
You're allowed to be angry at me. You know,
Yes.
that's fine.
Yeah.
When you, and I remember this one particular husband rang me and said, we don't want to see you. We don't want to talk to you. And I just went, that's totally okay. When you're ready, if you're ready, you can contact me and we'll have a chat. So I think they rang me about 7 weeks postpartum. And we actually went and sat and had a chat. And she said to me, she said, if we're still in Brisbane, when I have another baby, I would like to re-employ you as my midwife. So she was angry in that moment, and giving her the space to let her work through her feelings was actually really nice. But how many women, did you get some statistics, Christy, on women who the amount of rate of transfer?
I did. I found some research because, you know, everyone knows I love a good bit of research. I actually found 4 really good articles, which I will share in the link. So let me just find the right one. So, which one was the? Oh no, the one with the numbers is gone missing on me.
It's okay. While you're looking,
Yeah.
I just want to fill in. So what happens with that anger? What happens with it? I would prefer like you, Deb. That's okay. Be angry at me.
Yeah.
Better out than in. I have this very strong feeling about everything. Better out than in. Babies, vomit, poo, you know, whatever, urine, you know, all these things that you need to get out of the way in order to let the baby out. So it's better out than in. So I would rather wear, you know, that anger than her to keep it within herself and be angry at herself or be angry at her baby.
Yeah.
Because I think it's really natural to have that anger.
Absolutely.
And I think that anger then might go to the ambulance drivers that come to pick her up and take her in the hospital, or the first person she sees when she walks in. And if they're, we need to check your vaccination, you know, blah, blah, stat, and all these things that have been added, the mandates and the regulations, that is just another restriction which can cause anger. So women can actually present to the hospital and be really angry. And then that anger will be triggered by someone saying, you know, your husband can only stay until an hour after the baby's born. And so that could be that person wears the anger. So I think we all, mothers, you know, and caregivers, need to be very aware that anger is just a part of that process, and to just be kind.
Yeah.
Anyone's going to get angry and has, you know, permission, if you want to use that word loosely, is the woman.
Yeah.
Everyone else in her space, partners, grandmothers, midwives, and, you know, the security guard, we all have to come to a place of compassion and understanding.
Yeah.
So did you find it, Chrissy?
So yeah, I found so as we know, one of my favorite studies ever is the birthplace study in Australia. So that was the 1.25 million women between 2000 and 2012 in New South Wales, where they compared a women with an intended place of birth at the hospital, a birth center, or at home. So there was this part of the article. So this is one of the published articles, which is called Mapping the Trajectories of Women and Their Babies from Births Planned at Home, in a Birth Centre or in Hospital in New South Wales, Australia between 2000 and 2012. And so over this 13-year period, they found that PRIMEPs, so women who'd never had a baby before, 23% of PRIMEPs who planned a home birth were transferred to hospital, and 0.8% of multi-parous women, so women who've had a baby before, 0.8% of them were transferred to a hospital.
That's interesting.
So it's a huge discrepant, like that's a huge difference. So just over 1 in 5 first-time mums who were planning a home birth ended up getting transferred to hospital. And
Why?
so they've talked about some outcomes, and it's like, it just blows my mind that still intended place of birth at home or in a birth center results in a higher rate of a vaginal birth even when transferred to hospital. So yeah, this study is really, really good, and it's really long, so I'm going to leave it for people to go and read, because not everyone loves research as much as me. But yeah, there's lots of different reasons, and it also talks about women who intended birth center birth and got moved to a hospital. So in that group, it was 34% of PRIMEPs and 12% of multis were transferred from the birth center to the hospital.
That's interesting, isn't it?
It is.
And so just like a random fact that I just want to share out of that research is that from the planned hospital group, they had the highest amount of babies go to the special care nursery.
Okay.
Isn't that interesting?
It is. It is. So it's all very interesting that it's someone who plans a home birth. And of course, I'm going to blow that horn a little bit because I'm also a mother of a home birth, but also a home birth midwife at this time. It's interesting that that the transfer rate was still lower for someone who was a home birth than those that have chosen a birth suite, which is attached to the hospital, which may be more sort of in line with a medical model or a philosophy of birth. So maybe, who knows why, and I mean that we could have a whole discussion on that. So as Deb was asking, what were the reasons, or is there anything that sort of, I know it's a long study, but is there some place that just has a sort of a listing of the various things?
Was it a stalled labor? Was it?
So it talks mostly about the risk levels changing. So going from being low risk or considered low risk to having risks. So like you were saying before, meconium waters or prolonged labors, things like
that. I found in my practice, they're probably the main reasons I transfer would be prolonged labor, a maternal request for pain relief, further pain relief, or meconium. I think they're probably the main reasons.
For me, and just looking at the various reasons for transfer, it's not just one thing. And I think as midwives, and the longer you've been in practice, you realize it's a much more of a contextual thing. you know, the need for pain relief, maternal exhaustion, the failure, that's a
I don't
funny
like
word,
that.
isn't it? It's or not moving forward.
Yeah.
Nature intends that it, you know, it might stop and start, and she might go for a sleep and then get picking up again, and the cervix dilates a little bit more, and then she gets exhausted. Oh, I'll have a sleep first, and then she comes back and she's more further along in her dilatation. The baby's descending nicely, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
There's this sort of movement forward in, you know, and there's no time frame to that, but it's when things culminate, when they pull together to give a bigger picture. And I think that the longer I've been in practice, the more I'm sensitive to the bigger picture, you know.
Definitely.
And you know, Meconium saying, I mean, back in the 90s, back in the good old days, back in the 90s, a very hint of a yellowish sort of glow to the membrane, to the waters, didn't necessarily mean let's pack her up and truck her off to hospital. Because there were other things that need to be taken into consideration. How was the mother faring this time? Was she progressing nicely, and was the head well down? Was it in a good position? Was it, you know, all these things were taken into consideration before we even considered doing anything different than supporting her with her plan.
Yeah, like meconium's a good one. Like, what happens if she's in the process of pushing and membranes break as we're in the pushing process? You're not going to bail her up and took her off to the hospital when you've got a head on view. You're just going to have to ride that motion. I think it's like you say, it's a lot bigger picture, and even taking into consideration the environment that we're in. You know, if there's I remember having this labor once. It was going on for a really long time. I was stuck at 9 for a long time, and we tried all the tricks to try and move it. But then I found out that there's one person in the room that was really, really fearful about a previous birth. And I knew in that moment that we were never going to have this baby at home because somebody else's fear
so that's
was holding it back. Was holding it back. And as soon as we mentioned, and I've had it a few times, as soon as I've mentioned, okay, well, maybe we should transfer to the hospital, there's like a, oh yeah, let's go to the hospital. It's almost like a
relief.
Like they're holding on a fear. And I've seen it with Maltese that get stuck at 6 centimeters. And as soon as you go, well, let's go to the hospital, they're like, oh yeah, okay, let's go, walk in the door and have a baby. Like there's not a problem other than an emotional stuckness.
But it's interesting you say that, because I'm also better out than in. So by saying that, you can get, actually, sometimes you can get the opposite reaction. Like I had a young lady who 3 days, and my baby was being brought in to have a breastfeed and taken away by the daddy, and then, okay, how long's it gonna, I don't know, and you know, and every few hours I was breastfeeding my child and the baby was taken away, and it was a very long, exhausting process for this woman. And there was a point where one of the doulas came to me and she says, oh my God, she wants to go to hospital. And I says, then let's get going. And they went, oh, and so the mother says, no, how about if I just have a rest? And I said, okay, because really at the end of the day, looking at the whole picture, it's her call. It's her call. And then she went and had a rest, and she woke up, you know, 6 centimeters. I was like, oh, well, she got some really happy things about that and carried on. And then the next day it was, oh, let's go to the hospital. Okay, well, it was the next day, but you know, within a bit of a time. And I said, oh, okay, let's go to the hospital. No, I just haven't done that. Well, she actually eventually sat on the toilet and had a beautiful birth at home. But it was like, in my experience, sometimes just by saying the word, this is what's happening, this is what I'm seeing, these are my feelings about the situation, we have a trusting relationship, I have a feeling, sometimes I have information, like factual information, that we need to shift the energy here. We need to either think about going in, and then of course then you get the sigh of relief from the significant person who's just been waiting for that moment because they're scared, or it's like he'll say, no, she wants she wants to have a home birth, and I'm behind her. Sometimes it takes to be confronted by
with
it. And so then she'll either go and have a nap, or he'll just go, or the other, maybe it's a grandmother, who knows, but it's sort of like, no, I think she can do this, just being mentioned and being brought to the table, get the white elephant out in the middle of the living room, have a good look at it. But at the end of the day, she has to be the person who makes the call. Because I think that article or the study would actually look at that, and see that as a significant game changer for that woman, whether she stays at home or transfers.
And I think when you've got a client and you give them the information, like if we stay at home, this is, what my concern is. If we stay at home, this is why I think we should go to the hospital. This is in a situation where I really feel passionate about going to the hospital. Still honoring that woman's decision about what she wants to do, but giving her all the information to make a decision. My very first transfer from a home birth that resulted in a cesarean section, at 6 weeks postpartum, we had our appointment, and I said, do you want to debrief about your birth? And she said, why? She said, I had the most fantastic birth. She said, I laboured at home. I said, I made the decision to transfer after you gave me all the information. You came to the hospital with me. You and the doctors gave me all the information I needed to help me make a decision, and I chose to have a cesarean section. I'm really happy. I don't need to debrief about my birth. And in that moment was really powerful in that communication with women. It is a really powerful thing that here's a woman who's gone from home to the hospital, really taking ownership of her birth.
Yeah, and I think that's what it comes down to. And I mean, I've just mentioned the word trust, and that this is the joys of having a long relationship, or a longish when they come to you. But that trust between the caregiver, and that's why women choosing their midwife is really important. Is that they feel that they can develop a trusting relationship, an equal partnership, or a partnership with their caregiver, and so that in the moment where, and it's usually not something that's just brought up randomly halfway through the labor. It's actually something that you have that conversation with during the pregnancy as well, so that everybody's on the same page about, well, these are my boundaries. And then to discuss it, and well, these are my boundaries, and this is what I feel comfortable with, and this is what I don't feel comfortable with, looking at the context and all those other things you just mentioned. But so that when it's brought up in a labor, that, like Deb said, there's meconium stain, there's a delay, the baby's not moving down, blah, 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 all these things that, might impact on the decision making at the time, that woman looks at her midwife and says, right, you've given me this information. I know that you're feeling uncomfortable with being here. I know that you've got my best interest at heart and my child's best interest at heart. It's not you just sort of saying it because there's a piece of paper that says you have to think that way. It's because you think in my best interest, my child's best interest, we need to shift. We need to move. We need to move into hospital. I'm going to take that on board. And yes, I believe it's my decision based on what you've told me. And then we move forward with that. Hand in midwife and mother. Yeah, that's really important.
Sounds perfect.
It's so crazy hearing you talk, Terry, because there's another part of the research from that same study. So another article that I pulled this morning when we were talking about it. So I'm going to jump back to a little part of one of the reasons. So another reason for transfer is local policy. So I think that's like a really interesting thing to just keep in the back of our minds, that sometimes it's about policy and our regulations and our registration that makes us transfer. But in this part of the study, it was Birthplace in Australia, antenatal preparation for the possibility of transfer from a planned home birth. And so they were looking at what are the protective factors for women that need to transfer to have a positive birth experience. And this is quoted. The things are building the midwife-woman partnership, fostering professional connections, and reducing uncertainty. So all of what you just said, having that really trusting relationship and the woman knowing why are the reasons that we would have to transfer. But yeah, like everything you just said is basically what it says here, is that trusting relationship with the woman and the midwife, and it not being a surprise that you're going to transfer, that's what is a protective factor for the woman.
Yeah, that's interesting.
You brought up something that was really interesting, Christy, in the fact that, okay, the mother midwife relationship, but you also mentioned that collegial or that next step, because you're leaving a fairly isolated environment, and you're moving into, okay, the big guns or the collective, shall we say, where you've got the first step, of course, is the paramedics. So they need to be on board and be very respectful of that woman and not go, well, wow,
Yeah.
all that stuff. So that layer has, and that's only 2, maybe 3, that come to pick her up in an ambulance. Does she want the lights flash, at 3 a.m, so all the neighbors know that she's had a failed home birth? Or would, out of respect for that woman, just to do a little, if there isn't a huge emergency, that that they come in and they keep the lights off and they don't have the sirens blazing, and so that level of respect is really important. But then moving in next to arrival at the hospital, the emergency staff, because you usually go through emergency, there's usually a midwife that's been called down from birth suite to meet you at the door, because the midwives have had that conversation. Hi, I've got a woman that's coming in, blah, 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 giving that sort of handover of the telephone. And so that person that meets her at the door, that midwife, needs to be somebody who's going to embrace that woman's journey and have a huge understanding for what that woman might be feeling at that moment, the anger, the disappointment, the sadness, the fear because her baby or herself might be in danger, all those things. A partner that's sort of, relieved, happy to shake the hand of the midwife, yippee, or here if he's not happy with her having home birth or feeling nervous about it. So can you give a little bit more, or Deb, give a little bit more of your feelings about that level of interaction, that next level?
So I tend to find that if I have to transfer, I really talk with the woman about what to expect when she goes through. And, I haven't transferred that often with the ambulance. The majority of the time, they're fabulous. I've only had a couple where I've gone, guys, come on. Be a bit more respectful.
What about transferring in a car?
Oh yeah, if it's not an emergency, the only time I've ever really called the ambulance is postpartum, with postpartum hemorrhage. I think they're a bit unstable to be chucking in the back of your car. I'd rather have ambulance on board for that. But if it's during labour, I will get them to transfer by car. But having that conversation about what to expect, I always ring the hospital and I speak with the team leader or the obstetrician, give them a history and a rundown of what's been going on, so that when the woman gets there, they already know they're welcomed, with open arms. Mind you, I remember many years ago, a midwife was transferring a woman in, and then I remember the staff being like, oh, she's a home birth midwife, bringing a baby and blah, blah, whatever they were going on about. And I turned around and I said, we should be welcoming this midwife with open arms. She's made a clinical decision to transfer her woman in for the safety of the woman. If we treat her, the midwife, with disrespect and the way you're speaking about her, she won't come back. Next time, she will make a decision to keep that woman at home when it's not appropriate, because she's afraid to come to the hospital for how we treat her. Well, that just changed the whole mood, the whole environment within that birth suite environment, that they welcomed her with open arms. They made her a cup of tea. They were, and it was just such a shift. I think there's a lot of responsibility for the midwife as well, like how we treat the midwife. Because the woman, if she's her midwife, who she trusts, is treated with disrespect and like a third-class citizen, she's going to pick up on that as well, and then she won't have trust of the medical system. She will lose her faith in the medical system because how they treat the midwife.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Because
Mm.
you know, it's like your best friend being shit upon in the schoolyard. Who are
Yeah.
you going to defend and who are you going to stand
Yeah.
up for?
Yeah.
And it will be your best friend or the
Mm.
person that you know. So I think it's a really good point, Deb. Another
Yeah.
thing too is as midwives, we're sometimes very exhausted.
Yeah.
And it's been a huge thing because we, you know, we have put so much energy and hope
Mm.
in shifting perhaps from a traumatic birth, maybe the first time, to a birth that's going to be this thing that's going to heal her, and you
Mm.
know all these things that you know we've got this hope, and then to have that sort of taken away from us
Yeah.
as well. So, and also the nervousness of those things you just mentioned about. You know, what's the reception going to be of my colleagues? Are they going to go, oh yeah, that home birth midwife,
Yeah.
and feel hostility, and so she's also having to walk into that culture with
Yeah.
possibly fear about this reception she's going to get. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, but I just want to point out that we are running out of time. I really would like to continue this with our next podcast. I'd really like to look at what can we do as midwives, what can we do to help women, so to speak, to support them in their recovery of a transfer. I say recovery, I didn't mean it like that. It sounds like she's had a terrible accident. But do you know what I mean? Like emotionally, physically, spiritually, what can we do to support these women once they've had that transfer experience? It'd be really interesting, Christy. I'd really love to hear as being a midwife within the hospital at this point in time, I'd love to hear some of your thoughts around that. Even if you haven't experienced it, I would really love to hear your thoughts around working within the system, how you can support that. I'd really love to hear, you know, as a home birth midwife, you've got some plans for your recent transfer on how you're going to support her, and I've got some some stuff that I've done in the past, and I think that would be a really interesting podcast, the post-transfer journey, so to speak. If you're up for it next time.
Yeah,
Yeah, that sounds really good.
Yeah, I sort of feel that's really important. But before we get to that, them getting back home again, I'd still like to. We've got them to the front door of the hospital.
Yeah.
And I think that we've got the communication, which is really important. I would like to see how we within the system can support women with the best outcome. Because a lot of women think, oh well, you know, I transfer to the hospital, they're gonna induce, you know, they're gonna put a needle in me, they're gonna want to give me all the medications, you know, like the oxytocins to get induction sort of thing, or augmentation. They're gonna throw an epidural at me. They're, you know, and suddenly she might feel that she has no control, that all her rights of, you know, consent and control will be taken and stripped off her the minute she goes through the door. So I would like to explore a little bit more about what that journey into the system could look like, and before we actually get her back out of the hospital, and back into.
Well, let's do a three-parter.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah, I really would like to unpack more about the midwife as well. Like, I'm really interested in both the home birth midwife and what that experience is like for her. And then, yeah, the rest of the multidisciplinary team and how that's seen. Because, yeah, I have had experience as a student, even just seeing what a transfer looks like as an outsider.
Yeah.
And I'm really interested in the health professionals, like how that looks for everyone. So, yeah, let's do a three-parter.
It'd be nice to get like a doctor to come on and have a chat about their experience.
Or we do have a paramedic who's probably been involved with a transfer on occasion, who's actually planning a home birth. So that also would be very nice. And she's very articulate. I'm not going to say any names because she might want to listen to this podcast.
She does.
And so my thought is that watch the space for the
Yeah.
next one.
But
And
so
it-
yeah, I reckon, and I do reckon that I reckon we could do at least another 2 episodes on just this topic on transfer.
Mm.
I'm up for it.
We just scratched the surface.
Yeah.
And can I just say that anyone who listens to these podcasts, we would really like your input as to your comments and what you're feeling about this. That sounds a bit like when Russell. Anyway, yeah. So if you have comments, things that you want to mention
Yeah.
and add to the story about it, that we can,
We'll get it
or
going on
questions.
Facebook.
That's
I
right.
think.
Or questions you
Yeah.
might have about it, or topics that you would really like to see us cover as well. So
Yeah.
please make this an interactive thing, and we are more than happy, and we encourage you all to give us some feedback and some.
Yeah, somebody has said they do want us to cover feedback, and we are working towards that.
Yeah. And
Might
this
be
might
handy
be-
to go on after this, like the transfer, and then next time. But I really we do really have to go because we have other commitments, unfortunately. But I do want to share what I did
Yes, of
on the
course,
break
sure.
between our last podcast. I became a
Tell us.
I got another new grandson, beautiful Xavier. My daughter, I only had one daughter, 3 sons. And so my daughter had her first baby. It was very exciting. I got to hang out with them in Brisbane for a little bit. Can't wait to hang out with them again. But yeah, that's what I did on my break. I had a birthday. And
Congratulations.
yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Congratulations. And as a mother and a midwife and now a grandmother,
Yeah.
it's there's so many things that I would like to ask you, and maybe we can actually look at that as where the personal becomes professional or the professional becomes personal. And that might be something for a later podcast. So
So many ideas.
there is indeed.
But we do have to go.
Yes.
Oh, so
and we love you
beautiful
all,
seeing
and we love you, Christy, so far away, but in our hearts all the time.
Oh yeah, and if you are listening to this, just so that you know, we have Zoomed this one.
Yes.
So we're going to have a little YouTube channel. So if you prefer to listen while watching our gorgeous faces, it will be on YouTube. Okay.
Love
So yes.
I think I had a facial.
Awesome.
All right, guys. Love
you.
you. Bye.
Bye.
Love you. Bye.